And we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am delighted to be here with a variety of youth-focused organizations. And so I want to start by introducing myself briefly. My name is Nina Hersher. I'm CEO of the Digital Wellness Collective and co-founder of the Digital Wellness Institute. And what the Digital Wellness Collective is it is a global trade association of digital wellness professionals focused on tech-life balance in all different capacities. And so we are going to just hold up for 1 second and make sure that everybody is getting trickled into this event. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I think they're just moving over slowly from some different breakout activities. And so all of the people here today are involved with the Digital Wellness Collective in some capacity, whether they be a member organization or one of our positive change partners. And so what the collective was designed to do was to be an intentional community of people who are using technology in a way to enhance human relationships through really the intentional design and usage of technology. And so to that end, we have two main groups in the collective. We have our educators doing the amazing on the ground work, and then we have our developers who are creating the apps and tools that are going to be healthier for us to use. And so with that, I would love to have all of our wonderful organizational leaders introduce themselves, starting with David J. David is also an advisor to the Digital Wellness Collective. David. Oh, we can't hear you yet.
There we go.
There we go.
My name's David J. I use he, him pronouns. I am, in addition to advising the Digital Wellness Collective, I am the head of mobilization at the Center for Humane Technology. So I work closely with Tristan Harris to lead a lot of the movement building efforts that have predated the film The Social Dilemma, but right now really focused on giving people who've seen The Social Dilemma ways to plug in and help to create systemic change around the way that tech is built.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Jean and everyone, I would love for you to speak to what your youth specialization is.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jean Rogers, the director of the Children's Screen Time Action Network. We are a collaborative community of practitioners, educators, advocates, and parents working to reduce the excessive use of screen time for children of all ages. And we recently developed 2 youth seats on our advisory board. You may have met them today at some point or may meet them. Eliza Copens and Celine Bernhardt-Lanier are the first 2 to fill those seats. And we came to the realization, as many of the groups today are, the teens are living this and their voices are so important in this discussion. So happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Marie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I would love to. Hi, everyone. My name is Marie McGrath, and I am the Executive Director of Text Less, Live More. And we are a nationwide peer-to-peer education campaign to end distracted driving and promote digital wellness among the nation's youth. So each year I work with students around the country, and I have a smaller group of student leaders, 2 of whom you may have met earlier today on the We Are the Movement panel, Maddie and Robert representing us really well today. But we allow student leaders and encourage student leaders all over the country to take our program and run with it. And at this time, all of our initiatives are completely student created, organized, and executed, which is super exciting. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Marie. Teodora?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I want to start by thanking Susan and LookUp Live for bringing us all together. I feel very comfortable being in this virtual space. On this particular panel, I consider you all to be my digital wellness family. And so thank you all for coming together, and thank you, Nina and David, for moderating this panel as well. So my name is Teodora Pavkovic. I'm a psychotherapist, a parenting coach, and an international speaker. And I'm a little bit different, or my work is a little bit different because I'm a private practitioner. And so I see clients on an individual basis. I work with children and with adults. My clients range in age from about 3 all the way up to, I would say 19. And so I work with a really wide range of people. I also deliver workshops and trainings, and I do that at schools with teachers, with students, with administrators. I also do that in the corporate setting. And I also consult with companies who roll out services for children and need some advice from psychologists in terms of how to do that in the best way possible. I'm also part of the Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood, the Digital Wellness Collective. And everyone who's watching us, I really encourage you to check out all of these wonderful organizations who I think are creating really big change in this space. And I'm just really glad to be a part of this.
Thank you, Teodora. Olu.
Hello, everybody. I'm Oluwatosin Olabode from Nigeria. I run 2 youth-led, youth-targeted platforms. One, Strengthening Society Today Foundation, which focuses on providing interventions in the areas of suicide prevention, character development, and guidance and counseling. And secondly, Doing Healthy Africa, which is our digital wellness platform. Our goal with Doing Healthy Africa is to create a platform for young people to have the stamina and technical know-how to be able to thrive within the digital space. So in doing this, we focus on character development from a personal identity perspective, because we realize that if people understand who they are on a personal level, they can then translate or transfer that into their digital activities.
That's amazing. And we are so delighted to have you as our only member of the collective in Africa. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I also want to just remind everyone that if you have questions as we go along, the last 15 minutes will be reserved just for that. And so we're going to kind of get into a flow of sharing our expertise, but I would love to see questions in the chat and we will address them shortly. And so turning it back over to David. David, can you speak a bit about the Center for Humane Technology's focus on youth and youth-led movements and what you're doing and what you're kind of planning to activate in this coming year?
There we are, definitely. And I'm very excited to hear about parallel work happening with everyone else on this panel. So we have seen a tremendous surge of interest in the wake of the social dilemma. You'll be hearing from Tristan Harris later today about what that's looked like from his perspective. And so because of that, we are rolling out a system for people to be able to create circles to come together in their schools to, in parallel with many of the organizations here, hold discussions, hold peer conversations about their own relationship with technology, and also discuss how they can play a role in shifting the systems of power that define how technology is built, making them more inclusive, making them more humane, more aware of the impact that they have on our brains. Because 2 things in our high level discussions about how do we transform something as big and powerful as the tech industry, we transform it by changing the culture of how technology is used and changing how technology is built. And 2 things that we know are that the technology that everyone uses usually starts getting young people. So the decisions that you all make about how to use technology flow to the rest of the world. And also the technology that everyone uses often gets built by young people. We live in a world where the largest platforms in the world were written by students. And so it's not that we are, preparing a new generation to grow up and build the technology. Like, y'all are building the technology right now. And so we're thinking about how to resource, how to create the conversations to help to have the technology being built by you all right now be fundamentally different than the technology that we've inherited from the generation before.
Beautiful. Thank you, David. And that's one of the things that I really love about the Center for Humane Technology. And I think it's so complementary to all of these amazing youth-focused companies in the collective, because we have companies who are focusing on all these kind of different niche topics, from, how texting and driving can affect the health and safety of others, to in private practice, what does it look like to actually work with youth one-on-one who are really experiencing struggles around digital wellness? And with Jean, how can we empower parents and teachers to have the optimal tools, and so many other things in terms of like Africa, and we're all at different points in our kind of evolution of usage of technology. But I think the earlier that we can have these conversations about what it looks like to achieve wellness and be a good digital citizen in our usage of technology, the faster we can kind of unify around our principles and our language, which I think is something that's happening really quickly this year, especially with the emergence of the incredible Social Dilemma film. And so with that, I want to just open it up to hear from each of you a little bit more about like, what is one kind of challenge that you've encountered with working with your target audience, and what is one absolute joy that gives you hope for the future? Jean, would you like to start?
Thanks, Nina. I would love to. I think one thing that Teodora will agree with and others will agree with is that developmentally, teens are at a point where they're pulling away from parents, and the teen-parent communication, whether it's positive or negative, is key to the successful digital wellness of both parties, both the parents and the children. And so a typical scenario might be that if you're a parent, you are looking at the posture of your teen, leaning over their cell phone and just staying like that for a long time. And you might say, get off that thing. You're really frustrated, but you're also reacting out of fear because you don't know what's going on in that device, that child is actually traveling somewhere. You have no idea. It could be inappropriate content you fear, but it also could be a really wonderful friendship that's supporting that teen. So you don't know, but you're not communicating because it's not a natural time when teens want to communicate with their parents. And so this summer we were lucky enough to have Celine and Eliza with us to implement a vision we had, which was creating a resource for how teens and parents can communicate well together. It's called Dear Parents, and you'll actually find it in our exhibit booth today. It was just published a few weeks ago and released. And they interviewed teens all over the world, found out what would you always want to tell your parents about your relationship with technology that you haven't been able to because that communication is so awkward. And so parents will find things in this guide that tell them what they've they'll be surprised to hear. I'm kind of bumbling because it's so powerful that the teens said things like, my parents blame everything on my phone. I wish they would just talk to me about what's going on and not blame everything on my phone. So really, really interesting insights in the resource called Dear Parents. We're going to be holding a webinar in November 19th about it, which actually Max from Center for Humane Technology will be joining us. He's so fantastic at talking with the teens, but having their voices and having that communication, I think, is key. And we're really excited to be able to support that at the Action Network.
Thank you so much. Marie, I know that you're doing some incredible work with texting and driving education. I know that October is the informal month, as a lot of things were moved with COVID, and you're also quite close in terms of the work with SAD. So can you speak a little bit more to that and the kind of challenges and joys and hopes that you're experiencing with your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to circle back, Nina mentioned our partnership with Students Against Destructive Decisions, which is an amazing organization that does a lot of work in prevention with young people. And we are super synergistic in that they are also student-led and peer-to-peer focused. So a lot of the students that I work with are from SAD chapters around the country. And working with young people is a phenomenal gift. But the first thing that comes to mind when I think of a challenge is, and I'm sure that many of you watching and all the folks on this panel can relate, there's a bit of a catch-22 and a bit of a sort of deafening irony in the room when you are trying to reach young people and to talk to them about the dangers, the very real dangers of technology on roadways, as well as the impacts that that technology can have in their lives. And the best way to reach them is through that very technology. So how do we, and this is even pre-COVID, right? So how do we connect with students and how do we talk to them and get our messaging in front of them while still honoring the fact that we want to encourage balance and encourage unplugging and encourage wellness? with respect to our devices. So that has been, I mean, it's a really fascinating question to unpack, but it is challenging, especially now that we need to be hyper vigilant and super conscientious about the fact that many students that I work with and across the country are staring at their computers for their education 5 days a week. So that's definitely a challenge, but it's one that's extremely stimulating and exciting. And I think that the students really have the solution. And the thing that one of the biggest joys that I've had building relationships with these students is how optimistic young people are about what is to come and what can be solved, and these problems that I know perhaps for, we'll say, millennials plus, at least in my experience with my peers and above, that it can feel really doom and gloom, and it can feel really, really dark, and like there's no solution. And young people don't have that attitude at all. And I find that extremely inspiring, and I find it really hopeful and galvanizing to me in my work, which is why an event like this is so important and so empowering for all of us adult allies who are doing the work, and also for young people out there who are just trying to make it work individually.
And I just added a little text link to Marie's work as well, so you all can check it out. Teodora, I know that you are our outlier here, but we have you here for a reason, because we really want to hear about the clinical work and the kind of one-on-one coaching and therapeutic work that you're doing with youth and their families, and what you're seeing from those experiences.
Sure. So I think to answer that first half of the question in terms of what the challenges are, I think that the challenge has essentially stayed the same. It's the same as it's always been, even well before tech. It's that challenge of we can't quite understand each other very well, that parent and teen kind of couplet. And there is that same miscommunication that's always been there. There's that lack of understanding for what the teen is about, what they're attached to, what really matters to them. And that's, of course, tied into their brain development and the importance of their friends, the importance of belonging, of being accepted. We've seen all those things before, so that hasn't really changed in any way at all. It's just that technology has provided these wonderful and terrifying ways in which teenagers can satisfy some of these different needs. And then as Marie mentioned, we now have education taking place entirely online. And so that has kind of added on another layer of challenge to that. So the way I approach this in my work is really in the same way as I would approach anything else. And it's that challenge of a kind of miscommunication or a misunderstanding. And so for me, that's always a really important, it's a priority, and it's really a first step to, and Jean spoke to this as well, to really help parents understand what technology use looks like for their teenagers, why it's so important, what are, again, the needs that they satisfy through being on these different forms of tech, and by using them in all these different kinds of ways. And if I could give another film recommendation, I've been recommending them almost as a kind of prescription to be taken together, The Social Dilemma and Childhood 2.0, which was produced by BARC. It's a really wonderful illustration of teenagers and how they use tech, and them sharing this themselves in a very open and earnest kind of way. So that's always my first step, is to really understand myself, how that particular teenager uses technology, and then to really help facilitate that communication between them and their parents, and to also really have a very honest look at what are the pros and cons. So what are the ways in which technology use is beneficial? What are the ways in which it is really helping that teenager flourish, which is, of course, the word that the Digital Wellness Collective uses a lot. In what ways is it nourishing? And then what are the ways in which it's being really harmful? And what are the ways in which the teenager themselves really is not happy with? Because we know from a lot of the polls that have been done by Common Sense Media that a lot of teenagers do really intensely dislike a lot of different forms of technology that are out there today. So many teenagers saying, you know, I wish that I didn't have to use Instagram, but I feel that pressure to use it. And so whenever I come across things like this, it's really always about having that conversation around how can we make it better, which is what the summit is really all about. How can we, you know, if we can't change Instagram itself, let's change how we use it, because we know that depending on the information we put into it, the way we feed the algorithm, so to speak, the output is different as well. And so we have a lot more power than we realize. And that's really the communication that I want to see happening between the parents and the children. I do also just a little bit point the finger at the parents as well, because that's another thing we know, that teenagers have a lot to say about how their parents use technology. And so it really is a two-way street, and it really is communication in the true sense of that word. And in terms of the second part of your question, the greatest joys, for me, the greatest joy comes from seeing that understanding take place and seeing the communication being improved, and just seeing those light bulbs kind of go off, and also seeing a lot of compassion and empathy. I think those are really important when we talk about our tech use. We all struggle with it in different ways. Teenagers struggle it in different ways, but they have their own views on this, and they have their own opinions, and they have their own wants and their own needs. And that's really the most important thing for me, is for the parents to really understand what those are. And then once we know what those are, then we can work around the solutions.
Certainly. Thank you, Teodora. And I think something that you said that really resonated with me, that I know we teach about all the time, is that it's really important to look at the modeling of behavior, because oftentimes we look to kind of the kids and the youth as the culprits, and they're learning it from other people. And so, you know, while they were born into a different time and maybe digital natives in all different ways, there is still so much importance in terms of what happens in the household and what those interactions look like. And that's also why we, you know, focus on kind of families creating these communication charters where those norms come from everyone, and those like mutually agreeable times to turn off and unplug while we're eating, in addition to acknowledging that technology is a spectacular connective force. So thank you so much for your reflection. Alu.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, in terms of communication, we've seen a challenge, especially from young people, being that they want to be understood rather than attacked. So most times when and adults usually mean well, but we usually define empathy in the context of social media, for instance, as meaning well and then being sensitive. So one of the things we've realized as a challenge with young people is that they feel more attacked than they feel understood. And when you feel attacked, you get defensive. So the real issues can't be communicated. So a solution that we have under our platform is a principle of why and what. So we realize that a lot of adults tell young people what to do rather than explaining why they want them to do those things. So it's like, as a final authority, I know better than you, I'm older than you, this is what you should be doing in your best interest. While those people might do it, because they do not understand the reason why they're doing it, it becomes a challenge. But if you come from the perspective of, this is what I feel about this and this and this is what I feel you can do about it, the person feels you're giving him a room to speak. So it becomes a bit easier for them to open up. And then on the other angle, instead of asking young people why they're doing what they're doing, we see that it works better to ask them what it is that they're doing. Asking what it is that they're doing shows that you care, you want to know better. When you start with that foundation, you can now ask them, so what is the motivation behind those? That way it becomes a bit easier for them to open up, because without communication, then you can't provide any form of solution. Both parties are assuming, and with assumptions, you can only be 50% right or wrong. So one thing that works for us is finding that balance as adults and young people, and then building the conversation from that point of view.
I absolutely love that. And I think one of the beautiful things about what Susan has created with lookup.live is, you know, there was kind of this aha moment where all of us said, oh my gosh, we really need to be hearing from the youth, and the youth really need to be driving the solutions, because not only is the technology being created and recreated and adjusted right now, but there are all of these people who kind of want to share their experience. And so I have a lot of respect for what Susan has created with lookup.live and the youth incubator. And I think that in terms of forwarding and furthering this kind of youth-led movement, there is so much work to be done And so I would be curious to hear from each of you just a bit on what you feel are the next steps to activating and igniting this youth movement even more than what currently happens.
I can jump in to start us off and say that I take immense inspiration from Sunrise and from Black Lives Matter, both of which have been strongly and often explicitly youth-led in the way that they have focused on creating places for people to show up, focused on creating containers where people can come in their local communities, get support around the things they're facing, and then understand, like, have the power to plan actions. And really supporting small groups on a local level, I think, can be incredibly powerful. And another piece of inspiration I take is the notion that a movement can be leaderless. We can have powerful voices like Greta Thunberg that emerge, but we don't center it on a particular person or a particular technology. We create a leaderful movement where we're inviting as many people as possible in the leadership and giving them the tools to be able to align with one another. And I think that kind of movement, which we see in some of the most powerful instantiations of social change right now, is really needed. And I think complements also movements for racial justice and movements for climate change. That we need, there needs to be a strong intersection with movements for humane technology and digital wellness.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's why we really love looking at the intersection of digital wellness educators and digital wellness and humane technology developers, because I think it's just so important that these two groups be able to speak to each other, because our work is all tied up together. And the more we can kind of be clear on what our vision for the future is, the more quickly we can reach it. So clarity, as always, is absolutely key. And David, I loved what you said also about, equipping these young leaders with tools. And I think that's why all of us are here and why all of us are in this field, this, digital wellness, humane tech family, is that we're all seeking to create toolkits and different resources so that when a youth is drawn to this work, we can say, here's a place to begin, and here are a few different tracks and a few different ways that you can go. And so I'm feeling very, very inspired by all of you today. Who would like to share next?
I could share, Nina.
Please.
So I noticed that one of the questions that have come up in our Q&A are around this idea of youth fixing the problem. And so I just wanted to kind of very quickly speak to that. And I don't think we want to assume that they're just going to fix it. So I don't think our approach should be hands off. This is your problem, you deal with it, because you're kind of inheriting whatever mess it is that we've created. Because I think, again, going back to what Oluwatosin was saying, you're going to get a very intense defensive reaction, and you're going to get a lot of anger around that as well. Because I think it's important to remember that whether you're talking about smartphones or whether you're talking about tablets, whatever kind of form of hardware you're talking about, and everything that's housed within it, it wasn't created for children. And just because something like 70% or 80% of kids at this point own their own device, that fact hasn't changed. So they're still operating machinery, which was really not built for them, and they were given these by us, the adults. And so I think it's really important to again, it always goes back to communication. Every psychologist will tell you the same thing, so we repeat ourselves a little bit, but I think communication is really important, and we need to ask the youth questions around this tech, and again, what their likes and dislikes are, and what they'd like to change, what they'd like to stay the same. But at that point, I don't think we just kind of drop it. We really find ways to support them, and we continue asking them questions, and we continue just being present for them in as much of a mindful way as we possibly can, as much of a non-judgmental, again, very compassionate, very empathic way. And we really ask them, what do you want from me? And this goes back, Nina, I think, to the modeling that you were talking about as well. And this is something that I've been talking about for a few years now, that whether you are a parent or not, you need to be aware of how you use technology when children are around, even if they're not your children. And so living in New York City, one of the things that I've been doing and recommending other people do is that if you're on the subway, which you're probably not right now, but once we go back into the subways, if you see children, small children around you, put your phone away just for the duration of that ride while you're around them. One thing I've constantly seen is little children looking up in the subway cars and not seeing any human faces because they're all kind of digging into their screen. So the responsibility goes all around. I think it's on everyone. I think we want to involve the youth because we need to know where they're at and what's happening for them. But I don't think our attitude should be, you know, here, you're young and you're creative and you're imaginative, so you go fix it. It has to be a collaborative effort, and we have to ask them in very direct, explicit ways, how can I help you? What do you want me to do? And what do you want me to change about how I use technology and how I use it with my peers of my own age and how I use them with you as well. I think those types of questions are really important.
Yes, and I love the name of this particular panel because it really is about, you know, that intergenerational movement and how we can all truly be adult allies for youth activism. So thank you so much to you.
Let me just add, I think one thing that is key again in terms of collaboration and support is that each individual, both parties now, whether you're a young person or you're an adult, needs to know his or her role in the conversation. I think one of the reasons, piggyback to what Teodora said, why adults might feel, okay, so young people, you want to take the lead, and let me leave you to take the lead and see the outcome of that, is because to a very large extent, we might feel that they are beginning to take our position. I think it's extremely important to understand that each and every party has a specific role to play, and collectively we can achieve the goal. I believe should be that we want to get to a better society. Both parties want to get to see a world with a better society. So with that understanding in mind, it becomes a bit easier to flow in terms of communication. Secondly, especially for adults, I think it's okay once in a while, or even all the time within the context, to say you do not know. We need to be honest. Most times there are certain conversations that these young people are supposed to take the lead in educating us in, but because of ego or one issue or the other, we just hide it away, and then we reduce the impact that could have been made from that communication. So I think it's extremely important as we build collaboration, as we build support with the younger generation, that we are humble enough to be honest in our interactions.
That is absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And there is an essential vulnerability, I think, that has to occur for us to be able to have those honest conversations, which, you know, comes back to really acknowledging and normalizing our experience with technology, which can be incredible, but can also be distracting and overwhelming in so many other things. And knowing that every person, every age, every kind of industry is going to have a different experience with it. And so there isn't a one size fits all approach for age even, which is why I love kind of the individualization of all of this work. And so would anybody else like to add anything?
Just one last thought on that question, which is that naming that young people have an incredibly important and critical role does not mean that the rest of us don't have deep responsibility. And it also doesn't mean it's the only important role. I was in an amazing conversation with the AARP the other day about the important role that elders have to play, who hold a lot of knowledge about how to live in the ways that we're trying to explore. And so, you know, there's really important roles for elders, and listening to elders and intergenerational conversation just as really important roles for youth. And I think the important thing isn't to sort of worry about who's at the center. It's to worry about what does leadership look like from the place that we're sitting, and how can we be in a leadership that's supporting and lifting up the leadership of everyone.
Yes, and that intergenerational approach, I think, is something that we can't stress enough. I recently heard a phrase which was from pre-K to gray, and I thought it was just like a very nice kind of playful phrase that really encompassed how we really want to look at our usage of technology across the lifespan and incorporate wisdom from all of these spectacular generations. And so before we open it up to Q&A, as our last activity, I just wanted to hear from each of you and ask if there are any upcoming events at your organizations that you would like to make our viewers aware of.
I can start. So we have a monthly initiative program called Get Living. Every month there's sort of a different theme, and each of these themes is chosen and designed by our Text Less Live More engagement board. And the theme for November, is warm up for cold turkey, because we have an initiative on Thanksgiving Day that is to try and unplug, go cold turkey, if you will. Last year, the feedback from students and adults was, whoa, unplugging for a whole day is extremely hard. It's like running a marathon without training for it. So what we're trying to do next month, and I guess next month is right around the corner, so starting pretty much next week, is providing opportunities and online events and panels and tips and tricks for how to start slow and distance yourself in a way that feels comfortable and healthy and accessible, especially during this time, from your device, and sort of encouraging folks that it's a challenge by choice, right? And that there are lots of different ways to unplug and to explore this facet of digital wellness. So that's coming up on Thanksgiving Day, but we'll have weekly stuff going on leading up to that. And you can find all of that on our website that Nina linked already in the chat and on our social media pages.
Thank you. Jean, do you have anything coming up?
Yes, sure do. So Marie, I don't know about football in my house on Thanksgiving Day. That might be really tough. But fantastic idea. I'd like to invite everyone to join us on November 19th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That's our Dear Parents episode of Action Network Live. And you'll find the link on screentimenetwork.org under webinars and upcoming events. And that will be a time for parents and teens to join together. One of the things we've seen work really well too is invite other special adults in the child's life. You know, we've been talking about that kind of tug of war with the communications that can happen. And one thing that we've seen work really well with our parents is kind of stack the deck with some other adults that are important to the kids and have them jump on board. So a coach, a youth group leader, an aunt or an uncle that might be really influential in a child's life, have them join with us on the 19th and hear those perspectives and take away some tools you can use at home. And we also have a special gift that night, a really great goal setting app that we're offering with the webinar that parents and teens can use. So you don't just watch it and come away and say, oh yeah, that was great, and then not implement things. So November 19th at 7. Thanks, Nina.
Thank you. And Teo, I know that you have an upcoming event. I'm just going to link it in the chat. Do you want to say a few words about it?
Sure. Thank you so much, Nina. So yeah, I definitely share this this desire and this need to continue the conversation after the social dilemma. I was really excited in the kind of the days leading up to the premiere, and I feel like I've been talking about it nonstop ever since it came out. So I'm collaborating with an organization called Turning Life On that very much shares the same kinds of values that I think all of us in the digital wellness community have. And on October 29th, we're organizing an event where we'll be doing exactly that. We'll be taking the conversation a little bit further, and we're going to have a mix of experts in this area and youth voices as well, bringing them together, talking about some of the main takeaways from the film and what are some of, again, the solutions and kind of the next steps that we want to take. And so the idea really is to bring together, on the one hand, the youth voices, on the other hand, some of the experts in this space, but then also parental concerns and questions. And some of their worries as well. And so we're going to have a panel discussion, and then we're going to have a kind of town hall format where we're going to have breakout rooms, which are going to be moderated and facilitated by our panelists, to really get, primarily to get parents, they're kind of our target audience for this event, to get them to ask questions and exchange ideas, both with our experts and with the youth speakers as well. So I invite everyone to go to that link, find out a little bit more about the event, and then to join us next week.
Thank you.
And then we have one event coming up. I will drop a link into chat next Friday, the 30th, called How We Win the Fight for Humane Technology. That is going to be looking at our vision for a movement that has the power to really fundamentally change some of the structures that are talked about in the social dilemma. And we'll be sharing that vision and sharing how you all can take a role in helping us to step in and helping us to define it and make it a reality. And then we'll also be, and I don't have a link for this yet, it's not live, but we will be launching a story banking campaign to hear stories of people, about people's relationships with technology, about people's experiences of stepping back from the technology ecosystem we have, so that people can connect with one another, and so that we have, we can help people who want to move their stories into tools for advocacy.
Thank you. Sounds amazing, David.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so we have a project that we just activated. It's called No Gadget Hangout. We realize that more often than not, our attention is usually not with our intention. So the attention, for instance, is to spend quality time with your kids, but your phone is there. Definitely you can't spend that quality time. You might spend time with them, quite all right, but it can't be quality time. So we created a project called No Gadget Hangout. I'll be sharing the link in the chat. And the aim with that is just to return us back into getting our attention, into our intention. So any kind of activity that you can take advantage of that doesn't require technology, we're just encouraging you through this project not to use technology. So if you are going to take a walk, for instance, why not just enjoy that moment? You're going out on a walk with your dog, why not just go without your phone and just enjoy the moment you're having a meal, whatever the case can be. The general idea is if you can do it without technology, especially since we're using a bit of technology more these days, why not take advantage of the opportunity to walk without your gadgets?
Incredible. And I love the expression, bring your intention to your attention, or your attention to your intention. I think that's always so, so, so powerful. In terms of the Digital Wellness Collective, if you all are subscribed to our newsletter, we feature different events for members in the collective as much as we can. We're, I think, now beginning to hold a lot more events. The other thing is that as a part of the Digital Wellness Institute, for those who are interested, I will drop a link into the chat here. It is a 10-week certificate course for people who are really looking to become more immersed in this space. And we were delighted to be one of the action partners of the Social Dilemma as well. So that's really for educators, health promotion practitioners, parents, anybody who kind of wants to update their wellness toolkit for the 21st century. And so with that, I'm going to turn to a few questions here. Teo, I think we have one for you. From your experience with parents, how do you advise to put the toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak, after tech use has gone off the rails in the home?
That's a big question. I see Jean smiling because I know she gets it all the time as well. So I think the first thing to remember is that it's a very difficult, if not impossible, thing to do, although I have worked with parents who have done that as well. And you know, especially during COVID, depending on the country that you were living in, and you know, so many other factors that were kind of up in the air. I saw parents trying to manage some of these tech-related problems in different ways. And sometimes the solution has been to quit cold turkey, to use Marie's term. And at other times, it takes a little bit more of a kind of nuanced approach to do that. So again, as we were saying before, there isn't really a one size fits all, and it will depend a lot on the character of the child as well. That's always my starting point. As I mentioned earlier on, when it comes to my work with slightly older children, if we're talking about teens, young adults, the starting point is always that teen or that young adult, what their personality is like, what their tech use is like. The same is true for very, very young kids, even when they're as young as 5, even 4. So the question is really around what is it that they're using, what kind of tech are they engaging with, why do they like it so much, what are their favorite aspects of it, and then what are the difficulties, what are some of the most difficult aspects of trying to get them off that tech. And then once we have a clear view of that, then we can kind of come up with, again, solutions to that problem. We can look at, can we kind of tone it down and reduce it a little bit? Do we need to try and go cold turkey for a period of time? And there are lots of kind of members of this community who do take on that approach as well, and they do digital detoxes and so on. So those can be very helpful as well, but it's really down to the child's personality and the values of the family as well. We were talking about communication before. A lot of this is it's very individual, and that's why people oftentimes get defensive when we talk about digital wellness and perhaps pulling back on the tech a little bit, reducing tech use, because people have different views for how they want to use tech. So if it is a family that wants to reduce tech use, they're seeing that there's a negative impact on their child's behavior, on their child's ability to regulate their emotions, which, by the way, they don't know how to do really until they're 25. Sometimes it takes us even longer. Then we need to look at what are the most difficult aspects of tech use, and then come up with ways of not just reducing the tech use, because what you end up with is a vacuum, but really come up with alternatives. And what are the other things that we can do? What are the other ways that we can engage with this child and in developmentally appropriate ways? So what are the ways in which we can engage their imagination? What are the ways in which we can engage their ability to be bored? Because that is something that seems to slowly be dying out. How can we get them physically active? How can we encourage their eye-hand coordination? When children are that young, it's really all about their development. And how can we come up with activities that will help them to develop in the healthiest way possible? And also an often kind of overlooked aspect of all of this is their emotional development. So much of their brain development depends on their emotional development and the time that they spend with their parents, which is why a lot of parents over the past 6, 7, 8 months have been saying, my kids have never been more clingy than they have been now. And I keep saying that's because they have you right in front of them all day long now, which they probably haven't since they were born. And so as frustrating as that can be and unusual for a lot of parents, you want to take advantage of that as much as you can and really spend a lot of time with them, engaging all of their senses. It really helps their brain development. And that's always, with younger kids, that's always the direction we're moving in. How can we help their brain development in the best way possible?
Thank you, Teodora. I am mindful that we are unfortunately reaching the end of our session. And so I saw a question about kind of how to start conversations with adult peers and questions. And so another resource that I would really love to add to this chat is the Digital Wellness Day resource. And so last year we launched Digital Wellness Day out of the collective. We had over 35,000 people attend our online events. Almost every organization in the collective held an event. It was very powerful. And together we reached 1.2 million people globally. And so we created this e-toolkit, and it's really designed to be used year round to facilitate different types of conversations and know where to begin and what activities do you maybe want to start to try. And so this is a resource that we're constantly updating, but we hope it's helpful to you. And so I want to thank all of our incredible panelists and youth leaders and, organizations that are helping to kind of ignite these conversations, for coming today, for being part of the lookup.live summit. And please do look into their websites. Each of these human beings is absolutely spectacular. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the summit today. Thank you all so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Great conversation, everyone.